Well, hello everyone, welcome back to the workbench. I'm Dan here as always, and in this video I'm going to be doing just a quick demonstration of some masking techniques for rolling stock. Particularly what we're going to be looking at is adding masking tape to preserve patches or create patches on rolling stock. It's going to be a quick demonstration here, but this is something I get asked about all the time, is how to mask off patch reporting marks, how to do anything like that basically. And the demonstrations I'm going to be doing are going to be revolving around Burlington Northern, Athearn FMC cars. These are brand new releases from Athearn. These are going to be the cars I'm going to demonstrate. This one's already been taped up and patched up, as you can see. What Athearn is doing right now is they've come out with a lot of cool lines of Prime for Grime series rolling stock where it has patching done for the modeler. And I've been doing a lot of cars like this where they have the factory patching where one part of the car I want to weather, maybe with the patching I want to save. And masking is a great way to preserve factory patching like this so it doesn't get dirty during the weathering process of the parts of the car that you might want to keep clean. But again, Athearn has been doing all kinds of patch out jobs like this. And I've been wanting to do these masking techniques because cars like this are a little bit more complex where you got to basically patch up the areas you don't want to get dirty. Or say areas where I want to gloss coat, like these fresh patches for example on this car. I had to basically do a variety of masking techniques for this one where I masked off the factory patches first, dull coated everything else away from the patches, weathered them separately, and then masked off all the weathered and dull coated areas and gloss coated the fresh patches to make them look glossy and clean. As you can see, it's a huge transition, but this is how these patches are done. And again, Athearn's doing all kinds of really cool patch jobs in this way. They've come out with locomotives and rolling stock alike. Here's the 8911. This is another really cool patch job that Athearn has announced. I'll show this one a little bit later, but you get the idea. I do this kind of masking technique and everything all the time, and I'm going to basically demonstrate this for you here. Okay, so I've moved the camera over a little bit. Again, we're going to be working on a couple different cars here. I'm going to be particularly focusing on the two here for masking reference here. But what I'm going to be talking about with these cars, Athearn is releasing these where they have the factory patching done already for you. In this case, with the BN 452502, they've done the full car body patching where graffiti has been covered up. The problem here with a car like this is that this whole area here is going to get weathered up. It's going to get faded down because the prototype is very heavily faded. And again, they've done this nice patching and I want to preserve this. This masking technique is a great way to preserve the factory patching, which I don't want to get weathered. I only want to weather this part of the car body where it's already faded and chipped up, pretty much ready for the actual weathering process. Again, I'm going to be fading all of these cars down quite significantly, so I'm going to be doing this technique. This is another thing here I'll mention too. This kind of patching technique can be done with custom painted models, anything like that. You can do all kinds of different effects and do your own prototype patching. You can patch out reporting marks this way. There's all kinds of great techniques you can do with this masking tape technique that I'm going to be demonstrating. So let's get to the actual demonstration. What I'm going to be using for this, let's talk about tapes real quick. I'm going to be using mostly Scotch blue tape. This is a great low-tech tape. It's great for plastic models like this and brass models. It's good for stock plastic surfaces, any kind of paint like that. It doesn't damage anything, it doesn't leave any kind of tack or anything like that. So it's a great tape. I'm going to be using this primarily, and as you can see, I've already cut out a strip ahead of time that I'm already have already cut out a couple strips for to do this BN car here. This one's pretty much done, but you can see on the masking techniques for this car, I've not only used the Scotch painter's tape, but I've also used some Scotch tape for the small areas where it's a little bit harder to accurately patch up an area, trying to guesstimate cutting a piece on your pad. You can use Scotch tape like this. This is basically like packaging tape. This is matte finish magic tape. As you can see, it's a clearer tacky tape. I'll use this a couple times for the small areas like this again, as I'll demonstrate. You got to keep in mind though, this is a little bit more tacky, and so what I like to do is take strips of this off at a time, and I like to rub them out with my fingers to take some of that tack off, or you can take them and stick them on a surface a couple times to take some of that tack off. That way it's not so aggressive, because this will stick real well, as you'll see. It's very hard to use. I only use this really for small areas where I need to be a little bit more precise. So those are the tapes I'm going to be using for this, and we're going to be starting with the BN 452502 to start with in this video. So as you can see, there's a multitude of patches, and this will be a good reference for this kind of technique. What I'm going to start with is using my Scotch Blue painter's tape. I've cut a couple strips to the rough size of the area in between the ribs where these patches exist. And basically what I like to do, I can start in a random area. I'll take the tape and I'll insert it into the area between the ribs like this. Very carefully like this. Once I've gotten the rough position, then I can basically go in. I'll take an X-Acto knife and very carefully, once I've gotten that area that I want, which is right there, I'll just basically very carefully score the top of the tape a couple times, just like this. I'm doing this very lightly, that way I don't cut into the sides of the patches or into the plastic car body. But this is a quick way you can do these panels relatively efficiently, and you can see once you cut that strip out, you just repeat this process until all the ribs, or the areas in between the ribs, are covered up here. So for these larger areas, I'm again back to the blue tape, and again I've cut a strip to size, and I'm just going to carefully place this over. I know my hand's in the way. I'm just going to carefully place this over this panel like this, and I'll kind of go in there and just very carefully kind of graft it over the side like this, so I can get it right up against that rib, and just press the edges of the tape down. It's very important when you do larger areas like this to seal these edges so that no paint goes into these areas. Basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be dull coating this whole area above where these glossy patches are, and I'm going to spray whitewash over this entire area to really dramatically fade this green down. And this is the whole point here, is you really want to make sure you don't get any overspray underneath the tape or anything like that. So you really want to take a lot of care in doing this. Once I've gotten this up to the rib, I'll just very carefully take the very tip of the blade and just carefully cut it into the tape. Again, I'm not cutting into the plastic, I'm just on the surface here. Once I've done that, peel the tape back like that. And we can see we have the panel completely sealed in. Now the very bottom portion of this area is not patched, and I want to basically cut this section of tape out like this, right along the edge, being again very careful here. Now I'm just going to lift a little section of tape out, and again I'll seal these edges into place. I'm just using a pair of tweezers here, but you can use a screwdriver, a toothpick, the butt end of a paintbrush if it's very fine, a pencil, anything like that, as long as you're not writing on the side of the car. On the end reporting marks here, a small piece of tape can be cut, and it can be placed into position like this and coaxed into position with the tape. Just taking that and matching the border of the actual patch itself like that. Once I've done that, I'll just run it over with my finger a little bit like that, and take a piece of, or rather I'll take the tweezers over the patch like that, and again just tuck it around the edges nice and tight. Okay, so for the last patched example here, we have a little bit harder kind of patching here, where you can see these smaller mismatched green squares where some data's been covered up. We need to preserve these, and what we're going to need to use for this is the Scotch tape, the finer stuff. The reason I like to use this is because we're working with smaller areas. This is harder to cut large pieces of tape out to size. I find that the smaller the Scotch Blue tape is to cut in strips, the less effective it is, honestly, too. This tape is a little bit more precise, and this is where the higher tack comes into place. It's a little bit more handy for this kind of thing. So the best thing to do for this kind of masking is to tape a single piece of tape like this, and I'm basically going to cover this entire area with this tape. So what we'll do, we'll get it into position, and just like before, I'm going to apply this, and I'm going to get it in all of these fine areas. After I've burnished the tape in place, I just carefully take my X-Acto knife, and I'll just go over the very top of this tape, again with very little pressure here. There's not that much pressure in play here. We're just gliding the knife blade across the surface of the tape and cutting out the rough squares that we need. There's these little data patches up here, so I'm just going to cut the tape out for these, just following the edges very carefully. After we've taped off everything, we can go ahead and carefully remove the masking tape around the areas that we cut the squares in. So you just carefully go in. If one catches, just force it back down a little bit, and then move the tape around it like this. It's actually quite simple. As you can see, I'm just moving the tape around the areas where the patching is, like that.